I sense a pall has gone over the room because an administrator has approached the podium with visible sheets of paper. Trust me, this won't be too bad. Good afternoon, persons of quality. My name is Lori Chesley, and I am very proud to be the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences at Grand Rapids Community College. Yay! I want to welcome you all to this year's TYCA conference. On behalf of not only myself, but also our president, Steve Ender, and our provost, Patty Trepkowski, I want to thank you for coming and for allowing us to share our college, our community, and most importantly, our faculty with you. All of us hope that you have a wonderful experience here in Grand Rapids. I do have to say that I have a special affinity with the English faculty at GRCC and with all of you. I was an English faculty member for 14 years before I went into administration. I have both glowing and scorching memories of that experience. It's very difficult and very, very special work. There are days when I miss it, and there are days when I don't. I suspect you've all felt similarly from time to time. What I wish for all of you is that this conference experience serves to reaffirm the value of your work, to replenish your commitment to serving students, and to reinvigorate your love of your discipline. The work you do every day in the classroom, in your offices, in the hallways, online, is so hard and so necessary. On behalf of all of your deans, thank you for the work that you do. As you have probably heard, this year marks the 100th anniversary of Grand Rapids Community College, the 6th oldest community college in the country. Although I have personally only been at GRCC for 10 years, that's 1/10 of its history, I'm not at all surprised that our institution has reached its centennial. I'm not at all surprised by its longevity, especially when I think about the faculty that we have, and especially the faculty that we have in our English department. They are tenacious, almost ferocious in their pursuit of student success. I've had the pleasure of working with and in a number of English departments in my career, all of which were very fine, but I have never seen the likes of GRCC's English faculty. I'm not kidding. In fact, when I think about it, I'm not sure I've ever had a conversation with one of them that was about anything other than students, writing, or teaching. And that is only a slight exaggeration. They're almost out of control. Of course, it's that kind of passion that's resulted in a conference like this. And although it was a collaborative effort on the part of all of the faculty in the English department, I want to take a few minutes to thank the conference co-chairs, in particular, Katie Collish and Nora Neal. Would you please stand? I also want to thank the steering committee members. So would you please stand as I call your name? Megan Coakley, Marianne Lessert, Kim Weingarten, Mursalada Mohammed, Jan Chapman, and Linnea Page Jenkins. And we all know that great events like this in great departments don't happen without great department leadership. So Janice Balliot, would you please stand up and be recognized? Having an artist of the caliber of Bonnie Jo Campbell at this conference is an honor indeed, and I won't keep you from her any longer. The range of experiences that she brings to her writing is amazing, as is the range of unique skills she possesses. If you haven't done so already, please take the time to read her biography in the conference program. It is amazing. I'll just note what for me are a few highlights. Her work has won an AWP Prize for short fiction, a Pushcart Prize, and has been a finalist for the National Book Award for fiction. Like all of you, she's a teacher of writing, working in the low residency program at Pacific University. Most amazing to me personally is the fact that she holds master's degrees in both writing and math. When does that happen? It's pretty amazing. One of the English faculty at GRCC, you've met her, Nora Neal, offers the following assessment of her work. Bonnie Jo Campbell's writing is smooth and real. She writes about characters we might see in our classrooms. Please join me in welcoming Bonnie Jo Campbell.
Thank you. Okay, and your mission at that table is to make sure they don't take my food away, so I get to eat afterwards. Okay, good. Well, it is such an honor to be here with all of you. Are you guys calling it TYCA? I was afraid to do that because, the C and the community. Okay. TYCA, at the TYCA Midwestern Regional Conference. Thank you so much, Nora and Katie, for inviting me. That was such an honor to be invited. And I think that I write about working class people most of the time. So I think that you and I are often involved in the same project. And that is to help people find value in places where they might not always find value. I mean, to seek out important elements of lives that aren't always as valued in our society. And I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to put that up here. Okay. Do I have to redo this now? You know what? Writers should never be allowed to even touch. They really shouldn't because they make a mess of it. Okay, so I should have. Okay, computer. But I found that it's easier to, if you have pictures, it's just easier to focus here on something. So I think I just say slideshow? Okay, where do you do that on here? Okay, slideshow. Okay, from the beginning. Okay, there we go. Now I feel better, like I'm introduced here. Okay. Talking to a group like this is a big challenge for a fiction writer because as those of you who teach fiction writing or creative writing at all know, we're taught to show, not tell. And so it's a little bit of a challenge for somebody like me to stand up here and tell you things. So that's why it helps for me to have some of these pictures up here. And I don't know, they were I couldn't remember they wanted the horizontal picture or the vertical picture. So I decided to have a nice line here, teaching is sharing. That's, I think we can agree it is. Okay, I want to make sure that I said something important right off. In case I get distracted later and I don't say anything more important. As a teacher, I am not interested in talent at all in my students. People ask me, what makes you really excited as a teacher? I'll tell you, it's not talent. It's not even ability in writing that makes me excited. It turns out that talent is a little itty-bitty part of writing. It turns out that talent is like 5% of what you need to be a real writer in the real world. All my life I thought that being a writer meant that you had to be really smart and you had to get things right and you had to, when you put things on paper, they had to be magical. And so I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And it also doesn't work because like nobody under 35 can write at all really very well fiction. Have you guys noticed that? It really, under 35, really almost no fiction writer is worth his or her salt. But writing, it turns out, is about hard work. And I was very relieved to learn that because I'm a farm girl. I'm from Michigan. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up lugging buckets of water up the hill. And to learn that writing was just going to be lugging more buckets of water up the hill was actually a huge relief to me because it meant that I did not have to be brilliant all the time. It meant I only had to be brilliant once in a while when I was sitting quietly in my room. And as those of you who are in performing arts know, writing is really great because you don't have to get it, you don't have to have it all every time. You just have to get it right once and you get to keep it. Tell the musicians that, they got to get it right every single time. So what excites me in teaching is when a student shows up who has a new story that I haven't heard before. And it happens all the time if you listen. And it happens all the time if you're not overly concerned about grammar and if you're not I know we have to think about grammar and things like that, but anything that gets in the way of that student who has a story to tell that hasn't been told, we got to find a way. We got to find a way to get that story down on the page, to get that story out of that kid. And by kid, I mean any of our students. I teach at what's called a low residency M.F.A. program. So I teach master's students, but it's a 2-year program, so I'm kind of like you all. And it's people who have regular jobs and work for a living. So it's not so different from the gang that you're with, but my students already do have a college degree. But what I find what I can do with my students, because they're working people and because they're people who have real lives, is something that you probably feel yourself, is that you feel your students, for sure they're your equals, and they're kind of your colleagues in a way, in some sense of the word. Writing is a very cruel world in the sense that I help students learn to write. I teach writing, and then the people I teach 5 minutes later have to go out in the world and compete with me. Think about that. They have to compete with me. They have to compete with Joyce Carol Oates, who is also sending her stories to literary magazines to be published. It's a very harsh world, the world of writing. There's really no practice space for writers except in the classroom. It's really the only practice space we have. But what I find when I work with my students and I work very intimately with the students, and in a way that not all of you can at all times, but I am allowed to spend a lot of time with a smaller number of pieces of writing. And so what that allows me to do is put myself in the shoes of those students and actually be their colleague and be their writing companion. And it means, I guess I can be more of a mentor. I can be more of a mentor to them. And that seems to be how writing instruction goes best. And so the real challenge is to figure out how to do that in a classroom with a bunch of people. So maybe I'll ask some of you how you do that afterwards. How you create those conditions of where mentorship can happen. And I guess we all do it by creating writing workshops. And I think most community colleges have writing workshops at this point. I mean, most of them have. I know is anybody in a school where they have an associate, what is it called? Is it an AA program? Associate of Arts. So it's actually a writing degree. And I know they used to have one at Kirtland Community College. Yeah, and they don't have very many. They're hard programs to manage. But okay, let's look for another thing here. Okay. In science and engineering, a black box is some device or something into which you put something, and you put it into the thing, and then something else comes out. And I guess for us, the thing is, the black box is the student. And so we try to put something into the student and hope that something good comes out. Does that work for you guys? Putting those things into those students? I think because writing, like nothing else, writing is so intimate. When you're trying to work with students, writing is so much more intimate than, I've taught mathematics, and you know what? It's a lot easier. I don't mean to say anything bad, but it's a lot easier at least to figure out where the student is doing well and where the student is doing badly. It's a lot easier. But if the student is a black box and we're putting something into the student and getting something out that we either like or don't like, I think we have to be so respectful because we don't understand we don't understand how that's happening, because what's going into the student is not just what you're teaching the student, but the student's whole life. You know, the student's whole life is that input, and so often as teachers we're battling the whole world of, maybe students who've been taught they never wrote anything, never anything that they created was ever any good. We might have to battle a whole generation of that kind of language to get, to put enough of the good stuff in to get something good out of the student. But we have to grade the students too. And I should ask your advice about that grading thing, because I haven't figured it out. Do you guys know that in the master's programs, they just pretty much give everybody A's? Do you know that? Because it's so difficult to figure out ways to evaluate what this output is. And I think if nothing else, we have to respect that what might be a good outcome for the writing is going to be so different for every student. And I think a lot of you teach composition. Is that most of you teach composition? Yeah, just nod your heads. Yeah, so that's the challenge. Okay, I know I come from this rarefied world where I get to teach creative writing, all the time. If I could suggest that there's one thing that could make students better writers, I would suggest that if we could make the students give a damn, that would be the most important thing. And I don't know how we do that with young students who are thinking about just getting through the course and just satisfying a requirement. But I think that my whole life of writing has been driven by my obsessions. And I have always, in a classroom situation, cringed when somebody wanted me to do an exercise. And I don't know if you have students who are like this, who are like me, but for some students, they think it's fun, to do an exercise, to imagine you're in a room and walk in a room and describe a room or whatever. I clam up when someone asks me to do something like that. When somebody tells me to free write, I can't do anything other than a grocery list. And I'm just mentioning this because if you're having this trouble with certain students, what the key to getting something down and for my students is to follow our obsessions. If there's any way to encourage students to figure out what they do give a damn about, what they do care about, and get them in touch with that. And I sometimes think that's a fundamental problem in life in general. I don't know, just with people in general, that they can't get in touch with what they really care about. But maybe some of our instruction should go there. Because once somebody really cares about something desperately, then I think then finally they can write about it. So I have never successfully done a writing exercise in my entire life. But I have written novels and I have written lots of short stories about things that really interested me. So I was going to show you some of the things that interest me. Okay. I'm really obsessed with like my local neighborhood. I live in outside Kalamazoo, Michigan, in a little town, and there's this guy Don York, and this is him in his tow truck, and he's one of those guys who always carries all his money in cash in his pocket. Do you know those kind of guys? It's like these junkyard guys, and so they're always carrying everything they have on them. And this guy's little. He's like 5'7". So guess what happened? Yeah, somebody followed him home, beat him up, almost killed him, left his like gray matter in the snow. And then somehow though, and then he was left for dead. My sister works at the hospital. She came home and said, Don York's dead. You know, they killed him. But then Don York didn't die. It was really weird. Like he actually came out of the coma. They put the gray stuff back in his head. And maybe he hadn't used the gray stuff a lot, you know. He was a high school dropout, you know. Maybe it was all extra, and but he came out of his coma, and they said he'd never walk again, and he started to walk, and he refused like all physical therapy, you know. Like they kept wanting to have this talk therapy, and he'd say when I finally talked to him after he'd taught himself to talk again, he said, "What am I going to talk to those doctors about? I got nothing to talk about even with my kids." So, okay, so I became obsessed with this guy. And they forgot to take away his license. And so the guy gradually like dragged himself up and became a tow truck driver again. He's not quite all there, but I think that's okay. You know, not everybody needs to be all there. And he seems to be able to hook a car up to his tow truck with no problem. So I became obsessed with him. And I interviewed him and hung out at the junkyard and was trying to figure out, like, why did this guy come back? He basically came back from the dead. And I just became so obsessed, I wrote a long, like a 20-page creative essay about him. And then I wrote and in fact, in this book, American Salvage, I fictionalized his true story, I fictionalized, and it was the title story of this book. And then I wrote some poems. Like I couldn't let it go. I'm almost ready to write an opera, actually. And so what I found is that once I was really interested in the material, there was no stopping me. And I wonder how much of our energy we could afford to put toward that to our students. Like, maybe it's impossible. Maybe we can't get them all interested, but maybe we can. Maybe centering some of that energy, maybe that's a good direction, because it's like love. It's like once somebody wants to sleep with somebody else, like all of a sudden, all the energy they thought they didn't have, you know, they find it. Okay. And this is Don York's cousin at the junkyard. Like I said, I was just hanging around the junkyard, and I couldn't believe, like, you think they'd have machines that do all this stuff, but no, they got this old man. This old man's there tearing apart a car with a crowbar, a car that he's got just balanced over his head. I can't believe it. I found it very exciting. Oh, I thought this one was later. But when I was writing my book, Once Upon a River, I wanted to make the girl a really good shooter. Okay, I wanted her to shoot really well. I wanted her to shoot like Annie Oakley. And so I wrote this book where a girl shoots really well. And then I showed it to my friend Gary, who's a champion shooter. And he said, "You got it all wrong." And so I realized that either I was going to have a book that was about shooting that wasn't very good. It's not really about shooting, but it's about a girl whose main interest is in shooting. Or I was going to have to become obsessed with shooting, and I was going to have to figure it out. And it worked. I learned to shoot. I did not actually learn to skin muskrats, although that's in the book. But I did watch a lot of muskrat skinning videos on YouTube, and I could tell you how to do it. So, but isn't that good? That's our Charlie's Angel. That's my friend Sean and my niece. So, the places that have been important to me in my life are the very places that show up in the fiction. And so that, I think, is one area where we can bring students in to talking about, to writing, and I think for fiction, for writing about not just about creative pieces, but about other kinds of pieces as well, is that the places, probably my novel, Once Upon a River, was inspired just by my family owning this little cabin. And you can see it's not very glamorous. In fact, it's flooded right there. It's actually flooded. But that's one of my obsessions. I'm also obsessed with eating local. We're probably not eating local here right now, are we? Yeah, they're probably not. So, do you guys know what those are in the bowl? Pawpaws. Yeah, pawpaws. And you know what's that big white thing? It's a puffball mushroom. Yeah, I got one at home in my fridge. So I'm pretty much obsessed with those. I could write endlessly about foraging food. Okay, you guys ever had a thimbleberry? Okay, yeah, they grow in the Keweenaw Peninsula and almost nowhere else. So, the best thing that a writer can become interested in is people. This is a guy, Mike Messer. He died recently. He lived a rough life. He lived in my mother's garage for 20 years. And I became obsessed with him. I became obsessed with the idea of a person. He'd lived in a lot of different places in a lot of different states. He had never accepted that he was just going to be a regular person who held a regular job, who, you know, although he did hold plenty of jobs, none of them that paid very well. But I found myself including a character like Mike Messer in a whole bunch of my stories. And it just took me getting over, you know, it took me taking an interest. Instead of just looking, why is this weird guy living in my mother's garage? When we left home, my mom rented out all our rooms. and then she rented out the garage, and which is totally illegal, you know. And but just, I could have just looked at this guy and said, what a weirdo, you know, what a weirdo. But instead, I started talking to him and found out he was a darn interesting person. And I would say one thing, the death knell of the creative writing process is judgment. The minute you start judging people, you are doomed. You're not going to write anything interesting. Your students, and you'll see it in your students all the time, they're very quick to judge. The ones who want to turn off. You'll see the students who just want to turn off that open mind that might have let them open themselves up into another world. So maybe there's things we can do in the classroom to withhold judgment. Like, how could we specifically even write assignments that did not judge? On the one hand, it's hard to get them to judge when you're trying to get them to, like, write the paper where you're supposed to, you know, what's the paper where you're actually trying to get them to judge. They won't do it. But show them like a person who doesn't dress very well, and, you know, you've got judgment right there. So maybe there's ways of, and I would ask all of you to try this, to try to get your students to turn off their automatic judging and see if that doesn't help. Okay, and I am also obsessed with, every year I make elderberry wine. And this is my buddy Steve, and I make the label myself, you can see. And so this is my buddy Steve. I gave it to him, a bottle on his birthday. And this is me making elderberry wine. And these are my butchers. I haven't written about my butchers yet, but they're fascinating. Is anybody here from Kalamazoo? Yeah, do you know Quality Meats? Ask me afterwards. You should be going to Quality Meats. It's like a family operation, and like you can tell when the 12-year-old has been stuffing the sausages. You know, like it's a whole family, and all the boys learn to stuff sausages, and the girls do, I don't know what they do with the chickens or whatever. But it's like you can tell who stuffed those sausages that day. So, but I haven't written about these guys yet, but I will. I really will. This is a family organization. They're they're a very Christian family. And they're just covered with blood all the time. And who else can you say that about? Here's a picture of a family reunion, and all of you have them. And I would say that community college students, and I don't want to make any generalizations because, but I think of community college students as the regular students, and I think of the other students as like the special elite students or something. So I know that's not really fair, but I think of like community college students as real people. And real people have complicated, troubled families. Okay, I'll show you a picture of my family so you know what I mean. That's my sister wearing that funny thing on her head. I don't know what's going on. But, there's a saying that every happy family is happy in the same way. How does that go? But every troubled family, happy families are all happy in the same way, but every troubled family is troubled in its own unique way. And the people who come from these troubled families are the ones who need to be writing. Nora asked me, she sent me some questions and asked me, like, why is it so important for everybody to write? And it's important for everybody to write. And I think we're all starting to see that more. Anybody who listens to NPR is like, now we're inundated with these stories all the time. All the shows on the weekend have become story shows. And there's that little van that gets the stories. Is it the Story Project? Yeah, the Story Corps. And if any of you want to do that, make sure you do that because they'll send you instructions on how to do it yourself. You know what? What a great assignment for your students to do one of those Story Corps things because they send you all the stuff in the mail, exactly how to do it yourself. How to do an interview yourself. And but in my family, I used to think that I was supposed to write about like elite people from Chicago. I really did. I really thought that like nobody wanted to read about my people. And when I finally got to be about 33 and realized that my people, these people in this picture, are really unique. And they're doing things that are different from other families. And I realized that I was supposed to write about my own people. And I would bet that for those of you who are writing, for those of you whose students are kind of stuck on coming up with what to write about, they're really looking past all the interesting things in their own families. I've all the time tried to get my beginning creative writing students, when I'm teaching at a regular college, I'm trying to get my creative writing students to write about like just the agony of being a member of a family. It's agonizing. It's agonizing to have brothers and sisters. They're maddening. And yet nobody wants to write them. They don't want to write about it. Like they haven't figured out that that's where the richness is. That's where the power is. But right here in this small group of people, there are people who won't leave their house because their teeth are so bad. There's abuse. Right here in this group, there's abuse. There's strange kinds of joy right here in this little group of people. And I think we often look past the places where life is the richest. There's me, I just killed that chicken. Writers should be brutal. I didn't really want to kill that rooster, but he was attacking I'm trying to get, in my family, you guys know, how many of you are connected to a farm still? Yeah, the number's getting smaller. There's fewer and fewer of us. So I'm trying to get my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and nephews, to still have a little connection to the rural life. But then, like, you convince this beautiful little child to come into the chicken house and collect eggs, and then she's attacked by a rooster, so we had to kill him. So, but that's my mom, and that's what he looked like when he was alive. He was beautiful. I still have his feet in my freezer. I've heard that they're really tasty. Oh yeah, here, I'll show you. Okay, I know this is terrible to show you guys, but what I want you to see. The reason this is important is because look how much bigger, the balls are actually bigger than the heart. And I don't know what that says, but it says something. And I am going to make a soup with those feet, but I haven't figured out how yet. Do you want to go back? Send me an email or a Facebook thing, and I'll send you a copy of the photo if it doesn't come up. And don't you love this little dish? That's blue onion, that little dish. I grew up eating on blue willow. And so I thought this was a nice variation on that, blue. And I just want to say, not everything works out that your students try. Not everything works out, but as teachers, we just try. Oh, yeah, and I'm obsessed with the little girls in my life. You know what? Life is so much better with little girls in it. I've been obsessed with, I got to have a little girl's lunch. But then I started thinking, it's a pain in the ass to get all those little girls over there. You got to do it on the weekend, and their parents are busy and everything. But then I started thinking, maybe I should just write a story called Little Girl's Lunch, But aren't they cute? And I don't know, I was thinking I didn't actually complete what I wanted to. I didn't complete my thought process on putting this thing up again. But I was kind of wondering, what about us teachers as organisms? What makes us teach the way what is the stimulus that goes into us that makes us teach the way we do? If we're the black box, what we want to think is that it's all that education we had, right? It's all that education that made us super smart, and that's what we teach from. But I don't know, what is it that we teach from? Is it love? Because I made a discovery recently that almost everything I do comes out of love, weirdly enough. That's the stimulus. And so, if we're thinking of bettering ourselves as teacher, we're always thinking in terms of getting more education or getting more something or other. But I don't know, if we're black boxes, what is it that we can put into us? And one thing I think we can put into us is our own obsessions. I think all of us work too damn hard. And I think we lose touch with what obsesses us. What obsesses us is the thing that will make us good writers, but it's the thing that makes us good people and interesting people and people who make a mark in this world. And so I think finding a way to get back in touch with the thing that we love, beyond beer drinking, that's easy. Although I lose touch with that actually even. So anyway, I just want to mention I have visited some of our local community colleges, but in case I haven't been to yours, you can always invite me. So. And does anybody have a program or a community college program where they put on plays? Because they did this great one at Owens. Is there anybody here from Owens? What a great, it's near Toledo. And they did this, they took one of my stories and made it into a play. And then they enacted this play, and it was unbelievable. And so I kept taking pictures of them. But this is Kellogg. Is anybody here from Kellogg? No? Oh, man. Okay. Well, I just want to say I learned tons from my students when I let myself, when I can take the time, when I can find a way to take the time. And there's me practicing martial arts with my students. And I get to go to Oregon twice a year and see my students in beautiful vineyards. But we have vineyards in Paw Paw. We could see our students there. And one of my students actually taught me how to mountain bike. And in Kalamazoo College, this poor girl in the middle died after she was in my play. It was so sad. I know, meningitis. And I know that you guys all heard about that meningitis outbreak. So those of you who are lucky enough to teach creative writing and have probably had, most of you probably do work with the communal aspect of writing. I mean, you all probably know this, but no important piece of writing gets done in a vacuum. No person creates all by him or herself a great piece of writing. It's always a communal project, always. I will stand by that. It is always a give and take between a number of people. And I belong to a poetry group, and I know in the creative writing classes, you all do this workshopping method. So, and I want to finish this up pretty soon so that you can ask questions, because I'm a person who will answer any question you ask me. And okay, I'm just going to say it. He's the most handsome writer in Michigan. Just so you know. And I put him up here not just because he's handsome and he has a chicken and my book, but because he actually is a really good writer, and he lives in Reed City. So just so you know, Michigan is filled with fabulous writers. Wherever you are at whatever community college you're at, you're within 20 miles of a world-class writer. So make them come in and talk to your students. Make them come in and try to kick your students' butts a little bit. My cousin Mimi also has a book. I know this writing disease, runs in families. More little girls. And just so you know, it's not all little girls, it's little boys too. Look, he was helping us with the hay. That's my great nephew. Okay. Oh, and there's my husband. So I would like to, does anybody get the reference? Twin Peaks. Yeah. Yeah, we just watched Twin Peaks, so that was an obsession for a little while. If you don't know it, you can ask me afterwards. So there's a log lady in Twin Peaks, so okay. And my husband has tractors. That's his obsession. That means that I can put tractors in my stories, and I can get all the details about those from my husband. This is Don Quixote, my donkey. More donkeys. I am obsessed with the donkeys, yes. And you know what? Somebody has been feeding my donkeys besides me. They're getting fat. And when they get fat, they get this big roll of fat on their neck, and it never goes away. And I got to catch the person who's feeding them. Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave that up there a minute. Although I do want to show you the picture of the banana. What time is it? It's probably late. You guys probably want to. Okay, we're getting close. I'll just show you the picture of the banana. Isn't this a great photo? My dad took this. My dad, who, rest in peace, just died last year. Hadn't been to a doctor in 35 years. That's my dad. Good-looking guy. Wish you'd gone to the doctor, dude. Oh, me and James Franco. You would not believe how drunk I was when this photo was taken. You can kind of tell, I think. I think there's drool coming out of my mouth. He threw the party when I was a National Book Award finalist. He threw the party. And so he was like serving, he actually was walking around serving drinks. And, he's like, does everything now. He probably is coming around teaching at community colleges now because he does everything. Okay. Who knows who this is? Lucinda Williams. I just got to meet her in Nashville. So somebody's trying to make a movie of Once Upon a River, and they flew me to Nashville. Go figure. I knew this writing thing would pay off eventually. Okay, so live well, write hard, share what you learn, and pay attention to the wonders around you. I would like to open up the floor to some questions, and if you don't ask any questions, I have my own questions that I'll answer. So I would advise you guys to come up with some you actually want to hear the answers to. Mm-hmm. If you shout, you're probably fine. All right. See, we should never be trusted with technology.
Check. Okay. I was just wondering if chicken balls taste like chicken.
I know, I did not eat them, I'll confess. I did hold my poor donkey Jack. We had to castrate him. And at one point, I was holding these giant balls. They were as big as pool balls. And I was thinking, I should really eat these. And then I just dug a hole and buried them. So I'm sure there's a name for them. I know it's like the Rocky Mountain oysters or something. But it's a shame about roosters. I'm obsessing over that currently. I love the whole chicken industry. I mean, I don't love the chicken industry, but I love hens, but having a hen house requires you do something with all those extra roosters. They just throw them in the pig pen or something. So it's a rough world out there. Okay, what other questions?
I have one. What's your favorite story, Once Upon a River or Q Road?
Of my own stories?
Yes.
It's like asking me which is my favorite
you
child.
You said you could ask anything.
Of all my children, which one do I like the best? I don't know. Maybe you mean of those two, Once Upon a River and I don't know. I go back and forth. I think I like the structure of Once Upon a River because it's more the structure of Q Road because it's more complicated. But I do love sticking with Margot Crane. She really is. I had to, after I wrote that book, I did wear a bracelet around that said, "What would Margot do?" Thank you for asking. You're so nice. All right, I'll tell you guys the truth. Whatever you ask me about teaching or about the troubles I've gotten into.
Here's a question.
Okay.
Was that a barred rock rooster?
Yes, it was a barred rock. Where are you? I can't even see you. Raise your hand. Oh, yeah, that was a barred rock. I know he's a gorgeous, big, gorgeous fella, but he just attacked those little girls. He drew blood. Yeah. And at my house also, we had some attacked turkeys, some wild turkeys, and they drew blood on us too. It's a rough life out there. You know, we see Bambi and we think it's all, you know, singing and birds flying. Okay, any other questions?
Hello.
Hey.
I probably could have just yelled.
Okay, what school you from?
Well, that's a hard question. I teach at a lot of schools. The one that's being advertised right now is Columbus State Community College.
All right.
But anyways, okay, so 2 questions. One, what's up with the banana, really? Like, what is that?
I know, isn't that great? That's a banana car. My husband and I were driving down the road and saw it, and we just got out and started taking pictures of it. It's actually got a license plate on it and everything, like somebody drives it around.
That is odd. My other question is a little bit more serious. So I know with my students, sometimes I struggle with them being descriptive or understanding narrative writing. And I've been hearing some different things throughout the conference that people are doing in order to encourage that with their students. And I wonder, because you get to teach creative writing, what kind of things, if anything, do you have to do with these students to really get them to understand narrative and description?
By that, do you mean giving enough description usually?
Well, I know you said you didn't like exercises, so I mean, like, what are some other things that, you know, one could do?
Yeah, well, I often find myself with students writing on their papers, stop here, look around, stop here. Because often students are so focused on plot that they're moving. Is that the situation you have? Like, they're moving through. They're like, this has to happen next, this has to happen next. And they don't realize that joy of, like, staying in a scene, that joy of, like, looking around, because that's where you find everything meaningful. Writing is really magic. This narrative writing is magic, because what it turns out is everything you need is in that scene. Everything you need, but you have to stop and look around. And everybody talks about the 5 senses, but mostly if you do too much with taste and smell, it comes out kind of corny, you know. So mostly you're doing what you're seeing. But find a way to make that student stay there. But I guess what I'm saying is, because I can see how that's the kind of exercise that you want students to do, because you want to say, stay here, keep describing. What do you really see? And if the writer, if it's a sad scene, you'll find that you see sad things. And if it's a happy, joyful scene, you'll see joyful things. But the students have to slow down to do it. And I guess you could think of it as an exercise, but what I find is I can't make myself do it outside of a story. So if I give a damn about the story I'm writing, I'm willing to stay there. And I find students are too. If they give a damn about the story, they're more willing to just be there in that moment, to keep describing, to keep going. It could almost be a fun thing to do, almost like a competition, you know, like in there to get students to, like, if they're working on something, they've got it in front of them. Okay, in this, have them all choose a moment in their story and have them just keep on writing, keep on looking. And because I find for myself, I still see new things when I realize I've rushed through a scene. Now, not every scene needs to be detailed. Some scenes, it's better to let them go by. I just had a student write a really good paper about those scenes or those places in writing where you're actually kind of like summarizing a few days or something. Yeah. And it's interesting because you need those as well. And we forget that sometimes because we want to focus on scenes. You know, I mean, one thing I usually tell my students is that everything that happens, everything important happens in a scene. And every scene should have something really important happening in it. And so I don't know quite how that translates into when you're working on pieces that are not as creative, but I think it does. I think, in every paragraph, something important has to happen, even if it's just an argument paper, something important and hopefully surprising. So nice if it's surprising, but we joyfully go there. When it's surprising, we're overjoyed. So I don't know. It's so hard, isn't it? Yeah. This teaching is hard.
I noticed you are quite frequent with the word obsession. And amongst your magnificent obsessions, have you ever seen a student who's become obsessed with the things they've learned? I mean it sincerely. I mean, to which the extent of your obsessions transfers in the experiences they had.
Well, I can think of a couple things to mention. One is that I do find graduate students sometimes do become obsessed with aspects of writing. You'll have, and usually it's something that, suddenly a student will become obsessed with writing a certain kind of scene. And that is fun. But I've also had the obsession kind of go a little bit awry. I think in the last composition class I taught, I had a student who was determined to get his favorite rock band. Maybe it was a Grateful Dead. I'm not sure. Maybe it was. He wanted to get that into every paper he wrote. And he did. And you know what? I think it made him work harder. And I think it made him write better papers because he was determined. He was going to find a way to get, and I'm embarrassed that I don't remember if it was the Grateful Dead, but let's say it was. But, his goal, as well as to get an A in the class or whatever, and to write these good papers, was to find a way to fit some aspect of the Grateful Dead in. And I think that was a healthy obsession for him. Unfortunately, what college does, I would say that college is so bad for student writing in so many ways, because what the students have to do in college, they have to trudge to all these classes, and they have to dutifully do all these things, and they do everything out of duty. And so, like I'm saying, with ourselves losing touch with what we really care about, I think the students do too. They lose track of what could really interest them about what they're doing, because they're so, and especially the good students, the A students, they're the worst. If I had anything to change about myself, I think I might go back and not be an A student, because I think I spent too much time trying to please my teachers and fake an interest in stuff I didn't care about. And so, like in the writing class, it should be a place where students can funnel some of the stuff that they really and truly are interested in. I'm always surprised they're not more interested in these argument papers that we have them write. Because you hear them argue all the time. They love arguing. They love fighting and standing up for their opinion. But then somehow when you translate that to paper, like it should be a requirement maybe when they're going to write one of these. You have to make them prove that's what they want to write about. Because, sometimes they'll choose one because they tell you they think it's going to be an easy topic. That's the worst, because those papers are never good. But we should make them prove that they're worthy of writing about a topic.
Got a question over here.
Yeah. So my question is actually twofold. And number one, did you develop the obsession with elderberry wine while you were in Romania, just out of curiosity? I'm curious because I've been there too, and it seems like everything there was elderberry
Was
flavored.
elderberry? Yeah.
Except that TYCA.
Well, because they grow wild, and they're a free. Elderberries are interesting because they're a free fruit. Nobody grows them.
Right.
They're just a free fruit. You go out beside the road and pick them. And no, I just became obsessed because they were growing in the ditches. I live in a kind of lowland, like Mosquitoville lowland, and all the elderberries grow in the ditches there because they're water-filled ditches. And so I just became obsessed with them. And the wine is really good. It's just so you guys know, it's very dry. There's nothing sweet about the wine. I make it very dry.
And speaking, because you've been to Romania and some of these other places, my mom reminded me of something the other day that I think we encounter a lot in our students, and I was just wondering about your perspective on it. My parents divorced when I was in my 20s. I was already in grad school when this happened, and my mom said she was going to write an autobiography, and of course I instantly get super excited when she says this, but she's never actually written it, but she had a title all picked out. because when she and my father divorced, they decided to sell the house, but she had all of these other things, and she said she was going to call it Homeless with Appliances, which I thought was brilliant.
That's nice.
But
Titles are hard to come up with.
well, but she thought that her life was kind of too small and that no one would be interested in it. And I find that I encounter that and we encounter that with our students sometimes. So I was just wondering how you get students beyond that to help them understand that a little life, that's where we find some of the most important.
I know that you are so right, that finding a way to students, I mean, part of it is that idea, the same reason I wanted to write about exciting people in Chicago, you know, because they were more exciting than the people I grew up with, who were like, you know, cutting up venison with a chainsaw in the garage, you know. I mean, I didn't know that was interesting. I didn't know that that wasn't everybody's common experience. And, or I thought I was a little embarrassed about it. I think often they're embarrassed about their small, and I've had a lot of students tell me that, well, I was never abused and I had a happy childhood, so I don't have anything to write about. And, but you know, just like I mentioned, having brothers and sisters, it's maddening. There's a lot to write about. Okay, this is another aspect of getting in touch with your feelings in order to write. It's like anything that obsesses you or any feeling that you can't shake, there's a reason you can't shake it. All of you have had something usually mean said about you that you still remember to this day. And you remember it from when you were 14 years old. And I can tell you, I remember the time I was making out with this boy on the couch, and he said, and I didn't have big boobs like my friend Tony, and he said, I wish your head could be on, or no, yeah, your head could be on Tony's body, or something. And I took it as a compliment because I thought he meant I was pretty. And but then, like, it stuck with me for years. Like, what was he doing? This is a boy I'm making out with, and he wants to cut off my head and put it on somebody else. But what I mean is just that anything that sticks with you, trust it. There's power there. Even if it's a petty jealousy, we've all felt jealousy. You know what? Have your students write about a time they felt jealous. Because jealousy, you can't shake it. You know you should. You know you shouldn't be jealous, and it's petty, but you can't shake it. So, like, investigate that. You know, why the jealousy? Why is that? Where's that coming from? Anything that you can't shake. Okay, you take in 1 million impressions every day. You take in everything you see here, everything you walk down the road, everything thought you have. Your head is swirling with thoughts. Most of them will disappear. The ones that stick there, if you can get your students in touch with these, if you can get your students in touch with the things that they give a darn about, those are the things they might be able to get somebody else to give a darn about. So if they see that the important thing is that they give a darn about them, then we have this black box that is ourselves, that here's something I give a darn about, let me work on it and see if I can't make somebody else care. And, you know, maybe it's just like modeling. One thing that's really helpful in this respect is to have students go around the room and share something. And I do this library workshop where people who want to write memoirs, often they want to write memoirs, but they feel like they have nothing to say. And so I tell them, you're going to come in here, we're going to talk. You can't leave until you have 25 ideas and things you want to write about. You can't leave. And I just throw out a whole bunch of things like, you know, what clubs do you belong to? You know, what surgeries have you had? Did you ever have an animal die? Did you ever know anybody who died? And just all these things. And when people start, what jobs have you had? Tell me about some of your jobs. Actually, writing about work is a very good thing. Getting your students to write about their jobs is actually very powerful if you can get them to do it. And really, because, you know, we live in a democracy, more or less, but not at work. So think about that. I mean, that's interesting. That's not a democracy. That's a whole different place. So find it. But what I find is that when I get people in a room, if I could have 20 of you and we're sitting around a table together, you're all going to tell little stories, and they're going to delight the other people in the room. And seeing how your little story about nothing gains interest from all those other people at the table is really empowering. And so I don't quite know I haven't done it as much in the composition classroom. The creative classroom, it works very well. But getting people to open up and share can sometimes be difficult. But finding a way to show people, look, you've told just the little story that you thought wasn't interesting, and now the other people in the room are saying, write about that. We're really interested. It really can be empowering. I think it'd be empowering for all of us. And the workshops I usually do are usually people of all ages. Like usually there's a few teenagers, and it goes up to age 80. And by the end of it, people are raring to go, raring to write. Just give a shout.
In the past year, I've heard 2 authors mention your work.
Yay!
I'll start over.
Okay.
In the past year, I've heard 2 authors mention your work. One is Michael Perry, and one is Jen Phillips. Do you know their work?
I know Michael Perry. I know Jen Phillips, but I can't quite.
She's from Alabama.
She's from Alabama? Okay.
And so I want to know who you admire.
Oh, God. There's so many writers. I mean, the thing is, there's so many writers in the world right now, we don't know each other. This is the problem. I mean, I can say of the Michigan writers, since a lot of us here are from Michigan, I can say Benjamin Busch, who I mentioned. Jack Driscoll teaches at Interlochen. He writes fabulous short stories. I will say that Laura Koschiski, who teaches at Ann Arbor, writes unbelievable stories and poems and novels, and she's unbelievable. At Delta Community College, the most prolific writer in Michigan is Jeff Van de Zandt. Every single school, Philip Sterling teaches at Big Rapids. Darren Doyle teaches at Central Michigan University. Every single one of these schools has fabulous writers. Every one of your schools has fabulous writers. And the thing is, my favorite writers, I guess I love Margaret Atwood, but I'm not sure, I love her, but then I love Elizabeth McCracken, who's way less popular. Has anybody read Elizabeth McCracken? She rocks, doesn't she? Read that new collection she's got out. Amy Bender writes short stories that you just can't believe. You just feel like the top of your head gets blown off, like Amy Dickinson says should happen to us. So yeah, I feel like as a reader, life is tough as a writer for those reasons I mentioned. There's so many writers. Everybody wants to be a writer. I kind of wish, if I was sitting having a beer with you guys, I would say, let's talk about this. Why does everybody want to be a writer? It's a little weird. We all want to write, and none of us read enough, except my students who have to read 20 books a semester. Can you believe it? In Oregon, they have to read 20 books. I'm always trying to gear them towards short books. I'm like, you guys, this is too many books to read. My program requires 20, but Moby Dick, they're War and Peace, they're all over it. I don't know how they have time to write. But it's a wonderful time to be a reader. And those of you who who are fortunate enough to teach literature classes, you are doing the muscle, you're doing the hard work, because before there are writers, there have to be readers. And reading is the basis of writing, and the reading has to come first. But a lot of our students, I know, we lament that they're not as well read as we wish they would be, that so many other things are competing for their attention. So any last questions? I'm happy to, if anybody wants to get a book, or I'll sign it, or I'll just chat with you afterwards. And I know you're going off to a thing at 2, so I should probably let you go. So I'm more than happy to hang around and chat with anybody. So thank you very much.